Now the next thing that we will do is we will enable the creation of a new room. If you go back into the app.js, you'll notice that we have created a variable called rooms, which is set to an empty array. What will happen inside this array is that each room would be represented by an object which looks like this. So it'll have a key called room name, and let's just say that the name of the room is cloud computing. So this would be one room where all the participants are chatting about cloud computing. And it would also have a room number, which will be like an identifier, set to a randomly generated number. And this array will hold many such objects, each representing one chat room. So what we're going to do is we're going to get rid of this object, and we'll go into the chatrooms.html. Let's create the code which will try and create a new room within the app. So for that to happen, we have to attach a click event listener to the create room button that we have in the view. So this will be done by using the jQuery event listener notation. So we have to listen to the click event on a button which has an ID of create. And in the function, we're going to create a variable called room underscore name, which will be set to the value of an input field called new room, which has a class of new room, as you can see here, dot val. So this will fetch the value of the input field where the user types in the name of the chat room that he wants to create. Next, we'll have a quick and simple check to see whether this field is really populated or not. And if so, we want to generate a new room number, and we will just do that by saying parse int, and in the bracket we'll say math.random into probably something like 10,000. So we just want a random number. Now once we have a room name and a room number, what we will do is we will take this entire structure and we will create a socket.emit. And what the socket.emit actually does is it creates a new event which will be heard back in the Node.js app where the rest of the functionality will reside. So we want to create an event, we want to emit a message with an event called new room, and the data that will be emitted will be the object that we want to store in the rooms array back in the Node app. So that will be room name set to the room name variable. So the key is room underscore name, and the value is the value of this variable, followed by room number, the key, followed by room number, the value of the variable. So this will use the socket.io connection that we had created earlier, and it will emit an event with the message of this object. Once this is done, we will simply clear out the input field that we have in the DOM, like so. So what will happen here is that whenever the user types in something in the input field that you can see over here, so let's say if I type in something like express, and if I click on create room, the chat rooms view will create a message and will emit it as an event by the name of new room. And this would be heard back in the socket.js where we will append this data to the rooms array that we have created. So what we'll do in the socket.js we will listen to a new event called socket.on. So remember, we had passed in a reference to the socket that is established, the socket connection which is established. So we'll say socket.on new room, pass in a callback function with a reference to the data that will be received in this app. So in the chatrooms.html, when somebody types in the input field and clicks on the create button, there is a random number which is created, and both the name of the room that the person has typed in and the room number which has been generated is transmitted back to the app. And the moment the new room event is received back in the socket.js, what we'll want to do is we want to say rooms.push, and we want to simply push this data in. Okay, so the data is this object that we created in the chatrooms.html, and once this data is received back in the socket.js, we will just push this data into the array. So this will append the data into the array. Once this is done, we want the page to update the list that it shows in the view. So we want this list to update once the rooms array has been appended. So to do that, what we want to do is we want to broadcast, and we can do that by saying socket.broadcast.emit, and we'll create a new message with the event called room update. And what we'll do is we'll take the array and we'll convert it into a string by saying json.stringify, pass in the rooms array as a whole, and we want to broadcast this to all the users that are connected to the chat rooms view. The only thing which will not happen is that it will not broadcast back to the active user. So let's say if I am the one who created the new room, then I will not get this broadcast. So what we'll do is we will also add a socket.emit, which will send this event back at the user which created the new room event in the first place. Okay, so this is a simple way of broadcasting to all except the active socket, and also broadcasting back to the active socket. So once this is done, we will go back into the chatrooms.html page, and just like we were listening to the socket.on connect, what we'll also do is we will listen to the room update event which we've just created. So the way this will happen is we will listen to the room update event, and once this event is received, it will have the data containing the stringified version of the rooms array. So the first thing that I would want to do is to convert it back from a string to an active array inside of JavaScript, which we can do by creating a variable and by setting it to json.parse and passing in the data. So just like json.stringify converts the array into a string which can be easily broadcast over the socket.io connection, the json.parse will take that and will back convert it into an active array which we can loop over. And to loop over and display in the room list UL that we have over here, what we are going to do is create a very simple for loop. Var I is equal to 0, I is less than proc data dot length I plus plus, and you can loop over the entire thing, create the string that you want to put in the DOM and render that. Now you can always use the jQuery.each method, and there are several other ways of looping over the array, but I just prefer using vanilla JS when it comes to doing such simple things. So create a variable called str, and we will simply copy one of these and we'll convert it into a template. So first thing that I need to do is change this from a hash to room slash, and I would want to put a number here, the unique number of each room, and that will be done by appending this with proc data bracket I dot room underscore number. So remember that the rooms array contains objects. Each object has got a key called room underscore number and a key called room underscore name, right? So what we're doing is we are looping over the rooms array that we have received via the socket event called room update. We converted it from a string to an active JavaScript array by doing a json.parse. And then once we have that array, we are just looping over that array and we are extracting each object's individual key value pairs. So what we are doing here is we are creating a URL which says room slash and the unique number, and that's how you get that number, followed by start a new string and close this here, plus proc data bracket I dot room underscore name. Just get rid of this Node.js, plus start a new string and close here. Another thing that we want to do is newly created names should appear on top. So we will use the jQuery method called prepend rather than append, and we'll pass in this string. And every time that this happens, one other thing that we want to do is we want to empty out the room list so that it is rendered from scratch. So let's just take these and comment them out. They are no longer needed. Let's just go back into socket.js and just double check and verify, and let's restart the app. So I want to refresh, re-log in. So you'll notice that we have a connection established. Now let's try and create a new room. So let's create a room called cloud computing. Click on create room, and you can see that the cloud computing thing appears in the list below. So the way this happened was that when I typed in cloud computing, I clicked on create room, an event was created, sent back to the app.js, and app.js appended the object to the array, and then it created a broadcast event to all the users, including the active user, that is myself. And that's how we got the data back, which we are rendering in the unordered list. Now there's just one thing which will not happen, that if I refresh this page, the session is active, but when I refresh this page, whatever rooms are there in the system, those are still active, but I do not see that list. The reason why this happens is that when the chat rooms page is refreshed, the connection is re-established, but there is no way by which I am broadcasting the list of active rooms. So what we want to do is we want to use this line outside at the point when the connection is established. So the moment the connection is established, the active socket will receive the rooms array, stringified version of the rooms array once again. So let's just refresh this and see what happens. I'm going to restart the app and log out, log in again. Let's create a new room called cloud computing, just like how we did earlier. Create room, create a few other things, like I'm going to create express FAQs. There's Express FAQs. Then we'll create something called MongoDB. And now you have these 3 rooms. Notice the URL. Each, if I right click here and show you inspect element, you'll notice that each one of these URLs is room/9308 room/ and followed by the unique random number that we were generating in the code. Now if I do refresh this page, you'll notice that every time that you refresh, the connection is re-established, which you can verify in the console. So I refresh the page, the connection is established, and I get a list of these rooms back. Okay, so that's how you create a room. Now once we have all these URLs, as you can see, each one of these URLs will point to localhost:3000/room/ a number. So our next job would be to create this route called room, which accepts this unique number and creates and loads up the actual chat room interface.